All right, hey there, I'm Ben Weitz. I'm the Executive Director here at Shangri La. I have the privilege of stewarding this place with many of my colleagues here in the room. It's such an honor to have you all here with us on a special day like this. We have some cooler weather, we have some economy, we have some wind. We just have amazing folks on island that we get together to talk about really important topics. But before jumping into that, by show of hands, whose first time is today to Shangri La? All right, so if you look around, if you have not been here, that's generally the case. And so we're continuing to try to open accessibility through all sorts of ways, and including tapping into our programs as a part of the Doris Duke Foundation. So while many of you on island know us as a Museum of Islamic Art, we are a center of the Doris Duke Foundation where we are committed to a more equitable, creative, and sustainable future. And with that, we have fantastic grant programs that you would know, of course, from the arts perspective with our connections to that space. But we actually have a medical research grant-making program that is focused on really big ideas. Some of that we'll talk about today. And that might be news for you. So if you do want to learn more, go to Doris Duke Foundation on the web, and you can really dive in to learn. As you heard from Kumu Vicky, we are at where? Come on, staff. All right, Ku Piki Piki O. Okay, that's right, Ku Piki Piki O. And the Native Hawaiian, the Kanaka Maoli, who actually saw this place for the first time, saw it because, or called it that because what they saw, which was turbulent waters. It's rough seas. And so when we think about healthcare, public health, all of these themes, what a, no more of a fitting place than to have all the navigating one may do as a leader in the medical field, especially at this moment, to do so. So I know our founder, Doris Duke, would just be over the moon to know that we're using her former estate for a purpose like this. Now, we're thrilled to have these two amazing panelists here today. One, some of you might know a little more than the other, so we'll start with you, Governor Josh Green. Not only is he Hawaii's governor, but of course he is a longtime ER physician and a national voice on public health and resilience at a time that matters so much. So please, a round of applause for Governor Josh Green. And joining the governor is Dr. Rochelle Walensky, an infectious disease physician and the former director of the CDC, who has since returned to her teaching and leadership roles at not just one, but two Harvard schools, the Harvard Medical School and the Harvard Kennedy School as well. She is the co-founder and chief medical advisor of the Vaccine Integrity Project, an initiative dedicated to safeguarding vaccine use in the United States. And we are also honored to call her a board member as a trustee at the Doris Duke Foundation. Please welcome Rochelle. All right, this means we can get a little less formal away from the podium now. Great. Well, since you're the guest on the island, Dr. Walensky, I think, is it okay to go with Rochelle? Because I'll be saying your name a lot. Yes. So you, okay. So Rochelle, let's start with you. Just as your role as a board member, as a trustee of the Doris Duke Foundation, and how did you first connect with the foundation years ago?
So I knew this foundation as a medical research foundation. I was a grantee in 2006 at a very vulnerable time in my career where I was really trying to bridge together all of my NIH funding. And I received a Doris Duke Clinical Scientist Development Award in 2006, which was a really thankful gift to allow me to do research in HIV, which was one of the key places where Doris Duke, fortunately, was forward-thinking and wanting to do work in research. So I was a grantee in 2006. I always believe in paying it forward, and by the time I was finishing with my my own grant in 2011, I did a lot of work in reviewing grants for the foundation, and then served on the scientific advisory board until I had to step down in 2020 because I was not permitted to be on the Doris Duke advisory board while I was a CDC director. So I stepped down, and then when I returned after CDC in 2024, I was invited to join the board as a trustee, and then actually was able to open my aperture and see all the incredible other things that Doris Duke did, including here at Shangri La.
Wonderful. So speaking of opening that aperture, Governor, hopefully you'll appreciate this. We do steep our trustees, our visitors in the culture of Hawaii. We had a great thanks to Paula Kana, Executive Director over at Iolani Palace, a great visit yesterday. Yeah. And there were many parallels that we saw. Starting in 1881, you might have known that Queen Liliuokalani closed down Oahu because of the smallpox outbreak, and for that took much heat from the business community. And then, so it sounds a little bit familiar. And then literally 201 years ago, because I looked this up, 1824, we had King Kamehameha II and Queen Kamamalu, who they died because of a trip to London due to the measles. And so my question to you is, what parallels do you see today in the pandemic world that we live in, post-pandemic world, that still disproportionately harm certain populations? And that's for both of you.
Well, thank you. It's wonderful to be with you, Rochelle. I mean, my gosh, and thank you guys for being here and welcoming me. The parallels are extraordinary to reflect on how infectious disease has affected our people, the people in Hawaii, and how it reverberates culturally should not be lost on anyone. The fact that we've lost, kings and queens and innumerable people from infectious disease over the years, and then we wrestled together with COVID, just recently in 2020. I mean, it's almost astounding to see these patterns play out again. And when you said the Queen had to close down the state, I was thinking, my God, I had to close down the state, and we all, wrestled with that decision, as Rochelle was dealing with it at a national level, and we far away were wrestling with it at a local level. We could just see the impact on, our children and our kupuna, and also we were able to make the case that there would be less loss of life. In this case, 101 years from the described outbreak that you talked about. So I just think that these patterns are with us as humanity, and hopefully we can continue to learn and have the historical awareness. There's a lot of historical awareness that's needed in Hawaii, from the overthrow to infectious disease and to our present. But it's kind of amazing to think of it in these terms. And I would just end by saying, those who are vulnerable socially and economically continue now to die at higher rates, to struggle more with these outbreaks. We have the highest rate of intergenerational households in the country. That was one of the things that we were very aware of in Hawaii. It was one of the reasons we were very, very intentional about wearing masks and making vaccinations available to those who wanted it, especially if they were our elders, because they were living with 2 or sometimes 3 generations of people that were out and about and were going to definitely be exposed to the virus. So we knew what the wave could look like and how much it could hurt us if we didn't take action. So we were grateful that the people of Hawaii embraced, our approach.
And this is my second trip to Oahu, and the first time was as CDC Director. And what was really wonderful in meeting with the governor at that time was the partnership in both the policies and the hard decisions that needed to be made, and somebody who I knew really understood the data and the best thing to do for health. And that resonated before I made it to Oahu here in 2023, but really a thought partner with regard to how do we sort of get to the right place, both with regard to all the other things that we needed to manage and also doing the right thing for community and for health. And so I have remained very grateful for that partnership throughout my tenure at CDC and now to be back. I think that that's right. I mean, what we realize, and in my work in HIV, infectious diseases, COVID itself came to the continental United States by people who could fly in airplanes, who could take cruises, and it quickly went to the most vulnerable. And in infectious diseases, we see that over and over and over again. We saw that in HIV, we see that in tuberculosis, we see that in so many other infectious diseases. We knew that was going to happen. And so the most important thing we could do was really think about how we take care of our most vulnerable populations, our multi-generational households, those who were not going to have the resources to do all the things that, on a guideline you're going to say to do, but you recognize, like most people read this. I remember when I was at actually the bedside before I was at CDC, and I was talking to somebody who had COVID. We were gowned, gloved, masked, goggled, and, I'm saying the words about quarantine and isolation, and you recognize that this person has no way of doing any of the things that I'm recommending by virtue of the fact of where they come from, who they live with, how many bathrooms they have, how many rooms they have in their home. And you just say, like, how do we make it better for everyone?
Can I just say, isn't it extraordinary to have a thought leader, provider, who ran the CDC and is expressing, not in political terms, but expressing in human terms, how to care for society? It really is exceptional in contrast. And I hope that people see this and they reflect on that. Again, not political, but exceptional. And so I'm just grateful that, we have people like you that are serving at the highest level. It makes it possible for me to have hope about the future.
Yeah, I say that to Dr. Walensky almost hourly, and my husband's obsequious, but you've made me an obsequious person. So we're going to be going in and out of kind of darker and more hopeful topics here. So on the sense of pandemic preparation, on the national front, Rochelle, and then we'll talk maybe more about Hawaii, what gaps do you still see as we look at the road ahead?
Maybe I'll just start with, if you had asked me a year ago, I would have said, we need investments on our infrastructure. We need investments on our workforce. We have public health workers that are 80,000 in deficit. Our data systems. How do I know that something that happened today on Oahu that looks similar to something that happened in Maui or something that happened in Los Angeles or San Diego, that the data systems match one another so that we can see them in real time? Or our laboratory infrastructure. Are your laboratorians here in your state lab able to do a test for that rarest thing that might pop up? Let's say Mpox wasn't on my bingo card, but can your state labs do those kinds of tests, and can they do them across the country? And I say the infrastructure because when people say what keeps you up at night, I couldn't tell you what the next danger is, but I could tell you that if we have data systems and labs and public health workers, then we will be prepared for any one of those things that might happen. That was circa 2024. Today, I worry because I don't know what we can't see, because all that deficit that I was talking about has actually been eroded even further, that there's actually systematic, intentional undermining of our public health systems, that our core capabilities that I knew I could once believe in, there are things that I know that are gaps. There are places that have called for help for a lead outbreak where we can't necessarily help because we no longer have the public health workforce, the infrastructure in our leading agencies in order to do that work. We don't have full line of sight of that right now, and so I worry that we don't have line of sight of that, and I worry that there is a systematic, intentional undermining of a vaccine system in this country that protected people from diseases of yesterday, and we are now seeing those resurgences today.
Yes, and here in Hawaii, we have the opportunity or challenges, if you will, of supply chain and geography. So how does that play into what you are having to manage looking to the future, Governor?
The challenges are exactly what Dr. Walensky described. We are isolated in many ways here in Hawaii. Of course, it's the least kept secret of all time. But we are the most isolated landmass of the entire world. So when you think about that, it's not like we're kind of isolated as though we are in the central part of the United States on the mainland and it's a couple hundred miles to a lab. I mean, we're thousands of miles from any other landmass. And so if something doesn't exist here, we're not getting it. If there's a major crisis, I could give some specifics. For example, I remember in the earliest days of the pandemic, I was on Kauai in a hotel room, and I was watching a cruise ship come in. This was right before any major decisions were made nationally about would we or wouldn't we close down. And I went back to my notes really quickly, and I realized that we had only 9 intensive care unit beds and 15 ventilators on all of Kauai, a total, for a population of 70,000 people and many hundreds of thousands of people that traveled each year. Now, I already knew that we were about to make assertions about this virus, and the unknowns were challenging, but we knew it was going to spread significantly. And I was thinking to myself, my God, we have this few beds and ventilators if this becomes a very serious health problem, which it did. And so that, supply chain question, if you will, was shocking. And I remember so many conversations where we were maxing out during the Delta variant of how many beds we had. We went from 3 to 5 to 9 intensive care units stacked at Queens, and the ventilator capacity was down to functional 0, extra space. The Healthcare Association was starting to entertain the question of rationing care and what would that look like. There was a moment where we were down to 4 days of reserve oxygen, and the oxygen tanker that was being loaded onto a ship got slipped and wedged and stuck in a chute that was moving the oxygen, this enormous tanker, into the ship. And for a moment, we thought we were not going to get the oxygen in time, and we couldn't decide yet when to share that with society, because it was going to have to force us to change literally our clinical approach to oxygen for parts of the population, and we moved mountains to get the oxygen here. So, these are just some reality moments, and I just have to say, I can't yet fathom why the whole world doesn't work together in support of public health needs, from HIV/AIDS in South Africa, Swaziland, across Africa, everywhere through our globe, to pandemic spread and public health teams. It truly doesn't make sense. So this is a place, if we really decided we wanted to work together and unite, we could do it. This would be a perfect opportunity for people to lay down their arms and decide that the health of first children is the easiest place to start, and then all health systems should work. But that's how we had to calculate things here, and it actually also drove a lot of our decisions. We'll get into those, I'm sure, but I was so lucky because I was getting to interface once there was some changeover with Dr. Walensky's team, and we were able to watch what was happening on the mainland and then adapt based on our landscape. But I often tell people, those who were involved in public health and the clinical health aspects of things during that era, that was their defining moment in their careers, and you had to engage. This was not the time where you retired or stepped back. You had to engage because we have to tell the next generation what we learned.
So maybe this regime change is also a time to talk about vaccine confidence as well. What does the national data tell you, Rochelle, about vaccine confidence today, and specifically communicating in this era of misinformation or disinformation? And how can states like Hawaii, from your perspective, really start to rebuild trust from what's going on?
Nationally, I will say that there has been this effort to undermine vaccine confidence. It's working. There is no question that it's working. The latest poll from just a couple weeks ago from Kaiser Family Foundation and the Washington Post actually say that about 1 in 6 parents are not vaccinating their children. We know that COVID vaccination rates are down. We know that influenza vaccination rates are down as we anticipate a pretty bad flu season with a new subvariant. We know that last year we lost more children to influenza than we have in the last 10 years. So it's working, and we don't have the megaphone. The people who are sort of promoting the confidence don't have the megaphone. The real challenge at this point is, well, and I will say, but there's good news in there, which is that parents do look to pediatricians, to their healthcare providers, as the most trusted space. If you look at what the American Academy of Pediatrics is saying, for the first time, they are saying, going with all the other medical medical societies and healthcare professions to say, in fact, the thing that's diverged is your federal government. The societies are all singing with one voice and saying we should continue to promote vaccination. Every one of the new policies of the CDC and the ACIP, as much as it pains me to say, has been sort of countered by our professional societies, who generally send a joint statement that say we should be vaccinating our children for hepatitis B, for COVID, for all the things that have been actively undermined. George Bernard Shaw is famous for saying the single failure of communication is the impression that it's happened. And so we have more work to do in terms of being able to sort of articulate that we all that we need to do in order to get the word out. When the people who have the megaphone are intentionally promoting mis and disinformation, that makes it really, really hard. I remember going to the Hopkins Applied Physics Lab. This is the place that gave us the COVID dashboard early on, got the Nobel Prize for it, and I said, if you knew tomorrow that I was going to plant a piece of disinformation, could you do anything to stop it? And they said no. So that's hard, and it's also hard that we're actually intentionally not talking to each other. Our algorithms are now not feeding each other information. We're in our own bubbles. I sort of equate it to those child finger toys. We're pulling further apart and strangulating in doing so, when in fact what we really need to do is talk to one another, to breathe a little bit and come in the middle.
Wow, there's so much there. So it's all completely correct. The experience I have had is that there is this intentional disinformation. And, when you're in close, for the life of me, I can't figure why that would be of any value, or why anyone would accept that. I'll tell you a little story. So in 2019, right before COVID, there was the outbreak of measles, and you've heard some of this story, in Samoa. At that time, I think it was 83 children had died. And by sheer coincidence, we contacted, after just reading a New York Times article about the outbreak of measles in this sister nation of ours, Samoa, we said, well, we'll volunteer. The leadership in the country immediately jumped on the opportunity to have us not just bring 5 people, but bring 100 providers. We went 3 days later. And when we got there on the ground, we were greeted by these amazing citizens of Samoa. 300 people took us out into the field, and we vaccinated everyone. We did 36,997 vaccinations in 2 days. Because of generosity and the aloha spirit, people gave us planes and fuel, and some people that hadn't historically been working together in other disciplines worked together with the sense of aloha to care for people. And first thing that happens, we on the ground got there and people started telling us the story of why they weren't vaccinated. And they had suffered the worst kind of misinformation, and it was at the hands of the current secretary. And he was there with this Children's Health Defense, telling people don't get vaccinated, people are hurting you, they're targeting you to harm you with the vaccination. And it was what sent the vaccination rates through the floor. And look, if you just come down anywhere off of the 90 to 95 percentile for measles, you get an outbreak. They were in the 30s, so spread like crazy, and there was very little healthcare facilities, so people were dying in our arms there. So that was one thing that happened. And then we also learned amazing things about people. For those who are interested in the Old Testament, the Samoan people, though it's mostly a Christian country, from the Old Testament, you recall that people were asked to put red or blood over their door to have the angel of death pass over. Well, the people of Samoa incredibly tied red sashes over their doors or on their fences to invite our medical mission in to vaccinate people. Like straight out of the Old Testament, which was fascinating to me. And that's what we did. So we had that experience, and then 6 weeks later, COVID broke out, and we had the next experience with extraordinary people and some less than extraordinary people. But I have to say, it was eye-opening. And the idea now that there's this concerted effort to not vaccinate people, it's beyond cynical. It's in a different worldview. People have different beliefs, but that's where we have to insert science, and we have to at least give people understanding, and it has to be honest. If people choose to take a different path, that's their choice, I guess. But in these circumstances, if it's misinformation that guides their decision, then it's more than immoral.
Maybe just from a word from the ground in patient care. I've been a clinical infectious disease doc for 27 years. And while I was at CDC, my board, and I've seen one case of measles in my career. My boards expired while I was at CDC, so I had to retake my boards, which I did about 2 weeks ago. There were cases, they said on the board review, you're going to have cases of measles because most doctors have not seen one, and we need to be able to recognize it because we are likely next month about to lose our elimination status. We now have over 2,000 cases in the United States. We are now seeing diseases of yesterday for exactly this reason.
Okay, see, we're going to go up and down through this talk. So this isn't, we're going to kind of stay in the more the challenging place. So sticking to the science focus and climate and what's going on with the world and leaning into the recovery in Maui, specifically with climate health in mind. I'm just trying to give you a more specific question because I know we can talk about this for an hour on its own. What challenge do you just see immediately still on the ground, looking at 2 years plus out in Maui, when we're going to be having more and more of these disasters, not just here in Hawaii, but globally?
Yeah, that was our next crisis. That happened 8 months into our term as governor. And so we did COVID and had that experience together as lieutenant governor, and then 8 months in, the Maui wildfire. So the current biggest challenge is housing and hope. And we are accelerating that recovery through every skill we have. And there's lots to tell. I'll tell you a brief version of it, but I want to not forget the true question about climate. Our team learned a lot from what others have done or didn't do to help people recover. We made a point to, from an ER perspective, an ER physician perspective, to go to where the trauma was greatest, which was the 102 families who lost a loved one, and to immediately have resources for them to begin to heal. It's very personal for me because I'm wrestling with the circumstance at Brown, because my daughter's at Brown. Okay, so, and I'm thinking about those two people that died, these children. And we got Maya back yesterday. So, it's just very tough to think about right now. But the 102 people that died, we immediately brought everyone together, all of the individuals that were somehow connected, the energy company, the state, the county, the telecom companies, everyone. We decided to come together as an ohana, a family, and put together resources to care for those that had just suffered and struggled and lost. And what it did was it gave us a sense of common responsibility, and so not liability, responsibility. So then when we took the next step to help build people's houses, everyone was already in this HUI, this organization, this grouping together. And that's why within a year, there were no lawsuits left, everything was done, settled, and people could begin to rebuild their houses and so on. So there is a way to do it, although the tragedy has already occurred. One thing that I'll say that I'm worried about is what Rochelle talked about, which is if you don't have data, it will be difficult to know what is actually happening in the next 5 and 10 and 25 years. I'm not an expert in this space. I will rely on virologists and infectious disease experts and epidemiologists, but we need the data to know how many people are going to commit self-harm, how many people are going to have a different new concern with their health from lung disease, how many people are going to have a new challenge from an infectious disease that breaks out because the environment actually changed. So we have to have the data, and we will do that. That's one big thing. The other thing that did come of it, and sometimes positive things can come from tragedy, was after 2 years of failing to convince other policymakers to have a climate impact fee, we convinced them finally that you have to do something to address climate and risk. And so now we have the only one in the country They call it the green fee because they're teasing me because my last name is Green, which is totally fine. Thank you, Obama, for Obamacare. But the truth is now we have this mechanism. When people come, they can actually help us heal as resources come, and those resources will go to deal with the impact of climate on our environment. We can put monies towards rescue and safety and protection, the fire breaks, and we can do things to fortify people's future here visiting. And that is unique, and it's very good, and it's going to generate hundreds of millions of dollars, which just maybe will be smart enough to invest in the science also, so we can protect ourselves and look at our future. And maybe this little place, this dot on the map in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, will show some other parts of the world that you can do this, and you can choose your own destiny on science and on disasters.
I love that. Yeah, you often say that Hawaii can serve as a model for the country. What other sort of, from your vantage point, what other sort of opportunities are there? And then I would love to get your thoughts on that as well, Rochelle.
Hawaii is a unique place. The diversity that we have is extraordinary, and I think that I think about this all the time as a governor of this beautiful place, as a person that just gets to have this brief moment in time where I serve. I believe it's our diversity, and that has always, from a science standpoint, been a strength for humanity. Diversity is actually a biologic strength, and it is a cultural strength. It doesn't mean we're doing right by all people, some people who are struggling more, but it is something the world should aspire to, because where there's good diversity and people know each other, they're less likely to hurt one another. And they're less likely to demonize one another. They're less likely to be at war with one another. So I think that is a big strength. It also, we are on Oahu, which is literally the gathering place, and it remains an opportunity for us to do that also. So these are some of the amazing things about Hawaii. The cultural practice of the Hawaiian people is gentle in its expression, as you saw from Kumuviki and others today. It's special. It is extraordinary. In an era where there are terrible things happening in Israel and Palestine, in Ukraine and Russia, in several different parts of Africa, I would think that if we're able to spread information in a bad way, we could also spread information in a good way. And that could be one of our great assets. But it remains to be seen which direction humanity is going to tip. And I think we should all engage, try to tip it our direction, the way we are practicing things here. Because having just experienced the way it tipped in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, forgive me, it cannot be the way we go. It can't be the way we continue to go.
There's so much to unpack there. I will say, from my position as CDC Director, we saw the fires, the tragedies of the fires, the way the community came together, and then also food insecurity related to tribal nations in Alaska. This climate it's food insecurity, it's water insecurity, clean water, it is heat insecurity that people are, and of course all of these hit vulnerable populations faster than they hit faster, period. I will say I am new to Oahu. I am a visitor here, but so many things that I have learned in the last 2 days and when I was here previously are really about community, less about individualism and more about teaching, being with one another and coming together as community. I am sure there are challenges in all of that. There always are. And what I would say is we are so much better together than we are as individuals. That is true in everything that we do. It is true in health and it is true in life. So those, I think, are really the lessons that I think we really need to learn.
Can I comment just a philosophical point? I'm very worried about greed, okay? And it sounds like a non sequitur, but let me unpack that a little bit. Because there's currently this movement towards extreme focused wealth and affluence, and that so much of the world's resources are now being focused into a very small number of people, while so many other people are left without health surveillance, access to vaccinations, access to clean water, food. I'm very worried about that. I know we've all been worried about that, but I'm especially worried about that because the pressures that puts on society now are immense, and they are actually leading to the unraveling of even the basic humanity that we came to accept. And I think this is probably the place where we have to step back and get the world's leadership to acknowledge, and the world's most affluent people to acknowledge, it is time to assess that and see how we can come back from the cliff and make sure that the essentials are there for people. Because if we don't, it's going to hit everybody, first of all. It's going to result in outbreaks. And believe me, a terrible virus does not know the difference between a billionaire and a person living in abject poverty. It might hit the person in abject poverty more quickly. It will get to the billionaire. And it will unravel society and economies, which will cause problems for everybody. I'm not a socialist at all, but I will tell you, we've gone too far. And it's now, just from the perspective I have, seeing a lot of governors and a lot of presidents and a lot of diplomats, I'm seeing a very significant pattern. And we would be wise to convene globally. I intend to bring people to this space next December. It would be our honor to be able to come and bring hundreds of the world's leaders to discuss this exactly next December. And it's intended to happen. And this should be something we talk about and how it affects the very things that Dr. Walensky is able to really give us the true story on.
Well, that's great, and we are happy to host any topic that you're involved in, Governor. It'd be an honor. Related to your time at Shangri La here, pulling us back again, and on this ride, what has surprised you related to conversations like this?
Everyone said when I joined the board at the Doris Duke Foundation, you have to come to Shangri La. Like, you can see it in the pictures, you have to come, right? And I knew it as a place of Islamic art. What's beautiful for me as I try and make decisions on behalf of the foundation in the spirit of what Doris Duke would have wanted is to really understand her, to see her walking through these places and these magnificent spaces, to see the pieces of art that she chose to bring back with her, but then to recognize this not just of a place of magnificent art, but of a place of culture and ideas. And this is, and the mixing of those culture and ideas and the disarming of people, because it's such a beautiful space. And to think about that in those conversations, that we can actually have honest conversations, honest dialogue in a place as magnificent. How many times have I said to you, Ben, you get to call this work, you come to work here.
And I don't get all the empathy when I say I have a bad day at work.
Yes.
Not to the former CDC director.
But it's a magical space, not only because of its beauty, but because of the ability to unleash hard conversations and to have them in these kinds of, I would call them walls, but they're figurative walls.
This is one of the most extraordinary places. I've never been in this room actually before. I've been to Shangri La many times, but to be in this room, and this is a place, again, a gathering place that it's beyond compare. So it's one of these things that Hawaii can additionally offer, and it's ideas in the end. It's ideas for humanity that will save us. So it just is going to be special if that's what Shangri La gets to offer us. But boy, I mean, this is an outlier. I don't know what to say.
Well, that means a lot from both of you. We've been doing our best. We've actually we just hosted the former Prime Minister and now current Ambassador Kevin Rudd of Australia, who you might have seen the news with our president as well recently. Thanks to the East-West Center, we hosted a great conversation about security in the South China Sea. So these are some of the things that are happening just in our backyard here in Kupikipiki-o, known as Kahala, Black Point, but we're working on that, right? Ka'alawai. And, this continues this conversation. And really our foray into medical research. And many of you in the audience are in the industry. That's how you've been invited, or you are connected to those that invited you. And we do want to make you our ambassadors for this place. So yes, we give tours to both tourists and locals and kama'ainas about the beautiful art and the mo'olelo, or the stories of Doris Duke. But these spaces are supposed to be used and maximized at a time where there's so limited places to meet, so few places to meet on island to have important conversations. So again, pulling ourselves out for the future, maybe ending on hope. What gives you hope, Dr. Walensky, here as we look at the public healthscape landscape moving forward?
I'm disheartened by what's going on. It's been hard to watch an agency that I love not be trusted anymore. What I will say, though, is there are some incredible giants whose voices and names you don't know, who rappelled out of helicopters to drop test kits on cruise ships, who did extraordinary things, who are still there, working in ways that there's Ebola outbreaks in Africa as we speak, who are actively working in those spaces to try and protect the health, safety, and security of us here in the United States. And then I will also say I have this great privilege by virtue of my husband back there, who is helping to train the next generation of physician scientists, and boy, are they wicked smart, and are they really excited and innovative and wanting to change the world in just extraordinary ways. So this is not going to get them down, and it's not going to stop them, and we will build and rebuild to a better place. I'm convinced.
Wonderful. And if I can just call out Dr. Lauren Walensky, a round of applause. Pediatric oncologist, also at Harvard. I mean, doing just wonderful, wonderful work. You just can Google Walensky and get a twofer when you see the amazing work happening at Harvard. It's pretty impressive. Don't Google my husband. Well, I'm proud of my Shangri La work. You'll get some stand-up comedy, perhaps, in the past. So Governor, ending with you before we're going to give you all just a few minutes for some Q&A. If Hawaii and the nation, in having that in mind, if you can just pick one achievable focus moving forward for long-term resilience, what would that one thing be?
Well, I think the one thing would be that we have set the example that we will invest in a resilient future, that we're actually doing it. We're not talking about it. We're not theorizing it. We're doing it. And we did it together. We went from tragedy to triumph to have this mechanism to sustain the future, to invest in the future, to do the programs that have historically not been done. And that is the climate action that we took. And as much as we see misinformation spread, we can spread that kind of information. And so I liked how you said ambassadors, because that's what we all have to be. We have to be ambassadors for whatever good that we see or successes that we see. And then the next generation can come and work in that area. They can train and get their degree, their medical degree, their public health degree, they could be writers, but they can engage in that space. And I have hope that though the pendulum has swung one way, I do truly believe it swings back, and let's just pause and be grateful that there are wonderful young people that are coming up, and we will have to give them the hope that there's opportunity after this era. And this era is, I admit, is quite dark on many levels, but after we survive this era, can't be worse probably, and people, I think, do, when they see the sun come over the mountain, they are relieved. There is that sense of hope, and the hope will then be in these disciplines. So we have to stick with it, and that's the message I give to people now. Stick with it. Do not leave humanity behind for your own gains, for other careers. Stick with it, because there are wonderful leaders that are still out there. They may not be in positions that we were accustomed to, but they're there for you. And I see that hope in my children and nieces and nephews and all of the people I get to serve.
Well, that's wonderful. It really reminds me of a leader recently talked about this idea of lava, that you just can't stop. that flow, and of course, we weren't in Hawaii, and everyone kept looking at me. I'm like, well, I'm not an expert on lava, I just live in Hawaii. But this idea that once this lava stops, this flow is over, that is where some of the most fertile ground actually lies. And so we just want to be ready to do so. And knowing that you two are leaders in that space is really going to help me sleep well at night. So a round of applause again for Dr. Rochelle Walensky, Governor Josh Green. Let's see, we have some time for questions. And I see a hand already. Great. Sure. Yes. Sure. I think, yeah, I can repeat it if needed.
Hi, thank you guys so much. My name is Jeannie Kim. It's been wonderful to hear from both of you. And thank you, Ben, for such a great discussion. I have a question just about, I feel like with the federal government kind of slashing all the federal resources and making the CDC, there is an opportunity for the states to step up, and you have mentioned all the issues, but can you talk a little bit more about, is there any hope in terms of what the state is doing to compensate for all the things that are being taken away at a federal level and strengthening it on a state level and the data collection? And then also, what are you doing in this vaccine integrity initiative? And because to me, it seems like there's a lot, it's gone from the federal government, but there's all this opportunity below that's still being worked on, that's still being strengthened, and it's going to be what propels us once all of this era is over.
Yeah, that's the multi-million-dollar question, really. And if you didn't hear the question, it's what can the state do in this vacuum that the federal government is giving us? And then Dr. Walensky will talk about, the vaccine moment. So we can actually, because we planned ahead, fortify our Department of Health. So no cuts to the Department of Health, no cuts in programs, using our rainy day funds that we secured, somewhat thoughtfully during moments of, stability. So we have enough resources. We'll use the rainy day funds in the next 2-year biennium to make sure that we don't actually lose ground, lose our ability to do the science. We're even applying resources. It's a small amount. You'd be surprised. It's just, in our state, $16.5 million to pay the subsidy for the Affordable Care Act so that our 24,000 people in Hawaii who rely on that and our health system that relies on it will not also be forced off of it. So I don't know how long that can hold out, but we have a model that hopefully others will, if they have the opportunity to do it. We did food security same way. Now, just to give people perspective, though, we were able to cover the month during the shutdown for food security for $42 million. It would have been $1.2 billion for California. Not a possible thing to do. So some states have capacity because they're smaller or in a different position. We will not walk away from research. Because I have the concern that if you walk away, you shut down programs, it's 10 times harder to start them, and to go and find those people that were working in the disciplines because they've had to go to the wind or retire or lose hope. So we'll sustain everything. I think that it can't go on forever, though. One of the reasons behind the scenes that I insisted on passing the climate bill was because it created a new stream of funds that would be devoted strategically to the things that we weren't able to do before, and they're protecting a lot of the essential projects that we really have, cherished in Hawaii. So we can do it, but we can't pay for all of the basic research that was hundreds of millions of dollars that have been pulled. That is more difficult. That's where I think we will have to lean towards philanthropists and some industry probably to help us, reinforce the dam for a few years.
Maybe just 2 comments on that. We did not discuss this ahead of time. I will say, though, that as CDC Director, I know that 70 to 80% of the money that comes to the CDC goes out to state and local health departments. So that's an extraordinary commitment because you're missing some of those resources from the CDC right now. So I just want to say kudos and thank you in the spirit of health to do that for your state. The Vaccine Integrity Project is a project that started back in April with a conversation of me and Mike Osterholm at the University University of Minnesota when it became clear that we were not sure where vaccine progress was going to go in this country. And we convened a bunch of people to say, state and local health departments, societies, healthcare professionals, to say, how would we know when we could no longer trust the CDC in our vaccine and in our vaccine guidance? And within weeks, they fired the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, and we said, now is how we know. In that context, what became very clear in watching the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices is they were not doing and conveying the science that is generally done in those meetings, the synthesis of all the data out there. We can't fill the role that CDC generally plays, but we can gather that science. So among the things that we did over the summer in a labor of love was to say, well, the CDC is not going to give us the flu, RSV, and COVID data that we normally see, so we synthesized all the data that had been out there in the last year. 17,000 papers, 500 papers were abstracted, and we presented those data online. You can go to Vaccine Integrity Project and see all those data. We published it in the New England Journal of Medicine, so people knew that it was high-level quality data. When it became clear that ACIP was again going to look at the hepatitis B birth dose, we said, okay, we have to do this again. We did not see the data as presented at the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. We synthesized those data for 400 papers to sort of say this is where the data came from. That synthesis of review is available on the Vaccine Integrity Project. It is website. It's not possible for all the societies and health systems and state and local health departments to do that all together. So we are trying to do that as a service to say, here are the data for you to make these decisions when we are not seeing those kinds of data presented by the CDC right now.
Wonderful. Well, listen, I said a lot of Q&A, and I know we need to keep Governor on schedule. We have maybe time for one more?
Let's do a rapid fire answer thing, because I talk way too long, and I will give tight,
we did
concise
good. We
answers
got
if
through
there's some
our
extra.
questions. We have a couple more. Robin?
Yes. First of all, thank you, the three of you, for this important and reality-grounded conversation. These are very dark times. And before Jane Goodall passed, she said, you know, I don't know if humanity's going to make it or not. Let's be real. But what I do know is that we need to fight till the very end to try and evolve humanity to really look at the reality of what we're doing. And the notion of Hawaii was so many very, very wealthy people, billionaires, Michael Dell, Oprah Winfrey, Mark Zuckerberg, people that love these islands. Somehow we've got to think in a creative, respectful way as to how to move monies into important arenas like vaccinations, public health, that are eroding and upsetting society in a big way. So I don't know what the answer is, but Governor Green, would you comment on courting these very wealthy and wonderful people, you know, to start contributing to this state finance?
Yes, so perfect timing. Thank you, Robin. So yesterday I met with our friends from Lanai, so Mr. Ellison's team, and I'm spending the whole day personally with Mark Zuckerberg the day after Christmas. And Mark Benioff has been extraordinary already and is with us. Oprah is a dear friend. So we have already launched internally. We haven't made an announcement about it publicly, a Hawaii Futures Fund. And I'm hoping to have several $1 billion invested in this fund from people who choose. We put 7 buckets together. They're a reflection of exactly, I can tell you what we've talked about today and what we hope for tomorrow. Also, because we have the ability for the state now to have some programs that are somewhat forward-thinking that we talked about earlier today, there's opportunities to match those. And I would expect this now to be the way that we capture this extraordinary gathering of influential people who do care. It is a tough time because I'm going to cut them a little slack right now. There's immense pressure for people to fall in line, and I think you see some of that on the national level when we read about it with dismay. But I will tell you, behind closed doors, those very same people are often, without naming them one by one, are often also willing to help us be ready for tomorrow. And we will have success on this. We will invest it in ways on things like homelessness, and therefore helping lift people up, and on public health, and therefore sustaining the very things that have been put together extraordinarily by Rochelle and her husband, the underachieving pediatric oncologist, and others. And there, I'll end with this: the nice thing about Hawaii, the extraordinary thing really about Hawaii, is that when people get here, even the people that are giving us the most dismay right now often come down a notch when I spend time with them and I explain what we are in this state, when I look out to the Pacific and they have a perspective about Pacific and Indo-PACOM. There is kind of a moment. It doesn't hurt to put a lei on somebody and let them see something beautiful and hear something beautiful, but there is a moment where it is not quite as combative as we are accustomed to watching on television. And I'm an internal optimist. For those of you who know me, I'm very, very much an optimist. I believe that we will somehow emerge from this and look out for our humanity. And it starts, I think, with us spreading the word, but it's going to have to include those very individuals that have amassed so much influence. They have to plug the hole. They're going to do it in our state.
May I just, there's no way I could make it what you said better, except to say that in sort of these dark moments, as I'm feeling and hearing Jane Goodall's words, I have retreated to community. I've retreated to kindness. When I think about the darkest times of my days at CDC, the ones that, the third graders making me brownies, like, I'm good, right? So, like, in all of these really hard, dark times, texting a friend from across the ocean and say, I've been thinking about you today. I mean, those really, really matter in these dark times. I've taken to doing more of that, and I would invite us all to take to doing more of that, because as your great governor is building and rebuilding and creating all these incredible programs, we need to be here for one another. And community, these kinds of activities are what's really important.
You guys want to hear something crazy? These guys live next door to my cousin. Not kidding.
True story.
In Massachusetts, which we did not know until long after we met in professional communication. It's very unusual. So the world is sufficiently small that we can care for one another, I guess is what I would say.
I know. Now you're ready to talk story, because you don't need to just be on a small island to be running into folks. Maybe one final question, please. We were going to actually this is for arm wrestling, this table. So we have three doctors, many actually doctors. And no, I think if we can stick to Governor's suggestion of we'll just keep this a little more rapid fire, that'd be great.
So just maybe that's a quick question. I think one of the things that intrigues me is that to go to fundamental causes, and all the discussion about misinformation and loss of data, and even about removing words from the English language that's happening, those are proximal causes. But I think what you said, Governor Green, the actual fundamental cause is the way that I think American people think. And then remember, 50% of the nation voted the current administration in. And I work a lot in the international space, as you know, and a lot of people in the larger international space think Americans in general are very arrogant. So it seems like this has folded on ourselves in an extreme way. But it's my way of saying, what can we own that's a fundamental driver of our knowing everything? We know what's right for everybody. Be all you can be. Build what you can. But I think the fundamental cause is exactly like you said. These are approximate things that are people showing, watch what I can do. And they do what they as individuals can do. And even look at the intergenerational things. We all talk about different generations have different characters. This thing's playing out. But I just wanted to comment on fundamental causes, because unless that's addressed, all these downstream effects are going to continue. I just want to say that to Sam.
Yeah, I think I'm glad you said that, Neil. I really am. I think that an ideology of common purpose is going to be long overdue. I think that we can get caught up in the despair and the way our country is expressing itself and being viewed right now, and it's distressing, honestly, especially because it gets magnified so much by media and then perception. So everyone now thinks that we are a reflection of the current administration out there in Europe and throughout Polynesia and all over the place. But I think that can go the other way too. I think that there's a generation of people coming up, of the young people, that will find a common purpose. I think that they are in some ways less materialistic. The Gen Z and Gen Y guys, they're different in some ways. We're going to have to empower them. I think it's going to be up to those of us in the room who get to be their mentors or teachers or partners, their employers, to encourage their spirit to be different than what we're seeing right now. Because we get these descriptors of the greatest generation, which are our parents basically, and then the Gen X's and so on. But we got to give this next generation a chance to be who they are. And we could have a humanitarian generation. It could happen. We could have a catastrophe or a crisis that's so big that they just realize we have to reject the excess and greed that has driven some of our worst impulses. I have faith that they can do it, but we can't shut them out. We really have to give them a chance. So my team, we hire a lot of young people, intentionally. Just hire a lot of young people, give them a chance to be who they are, encourage. There you are. See, how old are you? Well, 24. Sitting next to Trevor, who's his last day. How old are you, Trevor? He's 24, and he's going to go back to California. It was challenging in Hawaii, but these are young people that are really important to me, and we give them a chance. I think things can get better really quickly. Just got to make sure we don't burn it all down before then.
Okay, so bringing us back up, I hope. This is the final question, Mahalo.
Aloha kako, my name is Kayla, and Governor Green, you said that you're gonna have a conversation next December about the ideas and gathering leaders across the world. My question is, how come we're waiting? The time is now. We are in the midst, as Uncle had said, the long-term effects down the stream of fundamental issues that have been occurring since years before. And what are you doing to gather the local kanaka and voices about what issues are imminent and close to home for our people in Hawaii? Yes, just to act on this, to not only have those ideas, but to follow them with, as you are showing up here today, as you are showing up in these conversations, with action so that we can sustain Hawaii and humanity.
Sure. So the question, if you couldn't hear, was why wait till December? Well, that's just that particular meeting. There in April is another extraordinary gathering of all of us invited in Maui to discuss what happened with the wildfire and the recovery and the land and the ahupua'a and moku'ula and so on. The sustained water source, the historic water space. So in my world, there's something happening. I just got back from a conversation last Monday, 9 days ago, with leaders from across the country on education in Texas, followed by Chicago. I mean, so it's happening every moment. And in Hawaii, for some of the things that are most central to our existence, anything that touches the mainland, it takes some time for them to come. But we are having this ongoing dialogue. We put together a large group of people that are mostly Hawaiian leaders, I think 8 out of 10, to talk about what is the future, for example, of military and what we should be and how we interface with them and how the resources then, if they are going to be part of our ohana, should flow to the essential needs that we have. And so there's really not 1 minute of any day that we're not having those discussions. In my conference room right now, a large group is talking about energy futures for our state. So it will constantly happen. The particular meeting of December, I'll tell you there's a reason why, there's a why behind that. It's because it will be 1 month after the midterm elections and 1 month before people have to be sworn in into their new governorships, congressional positions. So I will be able to capture in that space some people who are leaving and some people who are coming in, and everyone who will be able to assess the landscape of the world. And so it's going to be quite something to see people discuss what they are about, what they, in our setting, in our home, bringing our leaders also to bear, to ask the questions, to lead the panels of those people. And believe me, it's going to be recorded and broadcast and thought about. But I am going to do what I can to achieve that moment, even with some past presidents, to see exactly what people are capable of. But yes, there has to be much more dialogue all the time. And I wish people could feel what I am so lucky to get to feel, which is it happening all the time, because I know there's desperation out there. But there's also quite a lot of hope and opportunity that's generated from this place.
And I think the local, national, and global spheres you have to just dance through each day is just something that I can't wrap my brain around. We see these local, national, global conversations now that we host here at Shangri La. And I think, wasn't that person just in Vanuatu, and now they're in the UK, and meanwhile you need to care about all of these islands. And so, again, hats off for all you do, and again, for the question, because again, if you're not too close to it, you don't know what is happening if you don't see it. But some of these things, I've learned from many of the leaders like yourself, Governor and Dr. Walensky, these things take time. You have to, especially in Hawaii, of all places, you have to plant the seeds, you have to water the garden, you have to keep tending to the garden, and we can't microwave things in all places in Hawaii. We have to talk to uncle and auntie and make sure everyone's on board. And then you have to immediately zoom out and have a conversation with folks on the East Coast. And so to get everyone to come to Hawaii, oh, it's so far, how are we going to do it? So we deal with it all the time. And again, we're very, we just want to, again, mahalo you for all the great work, Governor, Dr. Walensky, and for all of you for getting on a shuttle, coming over to Shangri La.